So, hey, Tom, thanks for joining us.
Hey,
good to see you
David,
again.
Thank you.
It's always a pleasure to talk to you. We're here today for the 1839 talking to the wonderful Tom Schwenk. Everybody should know him, but if you don't, this is the guy to talk to for real estate. So that's why we've got him here today. We're going to talk about a few changes, and there's a lot of big news that's been happening in Galveston real estate, right? I mean, it's made national news, and there's a lot going on. So why don't we just dive in whenever you're ready?
Sounds good, my friend.
All right. Okay. So the first thing let's talk about is inventory surge. So I hear that Galveston has an inventory surge. I'm looking at my data here. This says increasing by 25.8%. So what do you think is contributing to the surge, and what kind of impact is it having on buyers and sellers?
Well, historically, this would be an incredible surge. This doesn't usually happen. But don't forget, we had a pandemic. Right. And if someone was going to tell me that I'd have had the best careers in real estate during a pandemic where people couldn't look at houses, no one went out of their own homes, yet they bought houses.
Right.
Because all of a sudden they didn't have to go to work. They could live anywhere they'd like to. And
Right.
who wouldn't want to live on Galveston Island?
Right.
Those of us lucky enough to live by the sea are lucky enough.
Right.
So they all moved here. And then guess what? All good things must come to an end, although a pandemic ending is a great thing.
Right.
Having the pandemic was not a good thing.
Right. Right.
So now people are called back to work. So I know many folks that wanted to live in a different neighborhood in Houston. But what happened, David, was that they couldn't get in those neighborhoods. So they said, you know what, we'll stay here, we'll go to Galveston. We'll move
Makes
our
sense.
kids there, but we'll keep our house. So now they've moved back.
Right.
The problem was they moved, they bought a house, probably a little bit more expensive than it would have been, but supply and demand. When
Right.
the demand's up, the prices go up.
Right.
So now everyone's selling, and more people are selling, and they put money into it. And real estate is a marvelous investment. The key word is investment.
Right.
You have to hold it to make it.
Right.
So as a result, they wanted to make the money back that they had, and typically a homeowner, when they sell a property, has an 8% closing cost. So just to get out of it, you're talking 10% of what
Right.
it was. Add the economic difference in what things were, you're talking 12 to 15% higher.
Right.
So people are putting houses on the market because they can no longer afford two of them. To make matters worse, there was a big rise in that little unimportant thing called an interest rate. So
Right.
as a result, people are like, oh, I'd love a second home. We've worked for it, but we're not going to buy one this year because
Right.
maybe it'll go down next year.
Yeah.
So there's not any buyers to buy these houses. And if there is a buyer to buy this house, they have to find a buyer to sell their house. So it's kind of like the little hamster on a running wheel.
Right.
So
Right.
that's what's happened. But people are optimistic. If a home is put on the market and it's ready to sell and it's priced correctly because you've used a real estate professional, they're going to sell
Right.
everywhere else.
Right. And there is another way to look at that, right? It's kind of like when you see a dip in the market in stocks, but you have valuable stocks, that's the time to buy. It's a buyer's market. So there are opportunities probably to snap up these properties if you're not looking to sell them next year or next month or something.
Yeah, correct. And as long as you go into it with the right way, it's interesting. I was quoted in the Houston Chronicle maybe 2 weeks ago, and it went viral. I mean, a friend of mine in England called me and saw it in like the Daily Mail.
Right.
And basically what I had mentioned was we do have a good short-term rental on the West End for properties. In town, it's a great investment strategy of, hey, we're 45. We'd love to retire in 20 years to Galveston.
Right.
Let's buy a house now, rent it out, and hopefully make enough money from taxes and insurance so that we just have to pay a mortgage.
Right.
And so that when we're ready to move in, we'll have it all paid for, and we have a great retirement. That's the
Great
kind
way
of
to look at it.
short-term rental that I see is sustainable in Galveston, in the neighborhoods that are conducive for short-term rentals.
Right. Right.
Who doesn't want to be on a Mardi Gras parade route? But
Right.
12 blocks away in the middle of the island where you're not close to the beach, downtown, or the Mardi Gras parade route, doesn't really make a lot of sense.
Right. Right. It does make sense. And this is off topic a little bit, but it feels like people got a little bit carried away with the STRs. Like, I think everybody was doing it, so everybody wanted to do it. Everybody kind of rushed to market with these properties at the same time.
Well, you're absolutely correct. And we could always tell in Galveston when people attended real estate seminars. because 3 weeks later, they were all there.
Right.
And also, one of the good things with television and streaming is people learn more about housing.
Right.
HGTV has been a marvelous advocate. We have Michael and Ashley Cordray in Galveston that have really shown a spotlight, but they do it in a sustainable, responsible way.
Right.
And, I love these house hunters and everything else. They see 3 houses in 20 minutes. They always have a budget. They always spend more than the budget. And they have a cocktail and they buy a house. And sometimes I think people think that's what it is, and it really isn't.
Right.
And short-term rentals, it's a business.
Yeah.
It's not just what we do.
Yeah.
You can't go into it without a business plan. You have to have your eyes wide open, and unfortunately, people didn't. And they also didn't hire the correct contractors, and they didn't get the correct permits. So when they try to sell a house, they don't pass inspections. They don't pass appraisals.
Right.
It's not a real estate agent saying, oh, your house can sell for this. Or maybe your grandmother's best friend's dog walker went to college with someone who's now a real estate agent in Idaho. And they tell you what it's worth. There's folks called appraisers that have licenses, that do research and do this every day. And they have a pretty good handle on what something's going to cost.
Right.
So.
Cool. Well, that's good to know. All right, moving on. So let's talk about some other things. So what I have here, and I think you said there when we talked beforehand, was it was a little more than this, but average home value in Galveston has decreased. I had 5.1%, but I think that may be old information. But we don't have to have an exact number. It's just, what do you think that these adjustments mean? Are they just a fluctuation? Is this a long-term thing? Do you think we're trending down?
Well, what it is while it really is a buyer's market, even though nationally it might not be, but where we are here on the Gulf Coast, it's a buyer's market. And we're not even getting people really looking at our properties. Currently, my firm has 82 houses on the market. Last week, we had 3 showings on all 82.
Right.
So when you look at things like that, it's like, well, why am I going to lower the price if we haven't even had anyone serious?
Right.
However, I do have someone that really wants to sell their house, and yesterday I did a whole market study for them. And the 4 houses that sold between $700,000 and $800,000, all 4 of them had a price decrease of over 10%.
Yeah.
But so, I hate to say that price is the issue, but it doesn't hurt to lower a price that maybe was a little inflated, because when business is good, and you put a house up for, say, $525,000, and this is just a generalization. The people, you got to look at, it's a business, even though it's your personal, it's your largest investment you're going to make. It's incredibly intimate. All right, we paid this much, and granted, it was 20 years ago, and I only paid $250 for it.
Right.
Well, it's now 20 years later, and that $500,000 is that's when they last me in my retirement home or whatever I'm doing.
Right.
So then you take what the costs are. Maybe that you have an 8% in closing costs. If you don't have a mortgage, great. If you have a mortgage, you have to pay that off. So pretty much everyone knows what their bottom line is.
Yeah.
All right. So then you take it from there. So you put it up a little bit, knowing that we're going to negotiate a little bit. And, maybe I'm not the best person in a house, and I probably didn't do everything I should have done. Some people are tremendous. I'd like a superintendent, and I own a house. I need someone to do it for me,
Right.
So there's going to be a little wiggle room, and everyone kind of knows that. So you're going to bring things down. But I'm starting to see that prices are now lowering even more significantly. However, that doesn't necessarily mean there's going to be a buyer.
Right.
I lowered one $100,000 and one $75,000. The one that I've lowered $100,000 is now getting activity. The other one's unfortunately not. Yeah, a little bit, but not. So price is only one factor.
I mean, that's interesting, because it feels like if there was awareness of the opportunities in the market, especially nationally, like, you may see more investors come in and buy these properties up thinking long term. Is that fair to say, or do you think it's...
No, I don't think that's fair to say. I think
That's why you're here.
No, I think that large investors are a lot different. They've gone into the rental market, rent to buy, that they've bought all these houses up, and now they're rentals, because a lot of people maybe don't have the wherewithal yet, or the down payment, or don't want to enter into an interest rate that's much higher than they'd like. Although they're not, they're coming down and they're much more reasonable than they were a year ago. But what I do see is short, smaller investors, but they want to get cute and they want you to owner finance it. Well, for the most part, we're in a community that doesn't have to sell their houses. Most people like living here. Sure, they might get transferred somewhere, but usually that company will buy their house and off they'll go. Most people might want to move from 33rd Street and Avenue R to the East End. Well, they're going to get there, but they don't need, no one's desperate. And I get investors every day on the phone and they just don't understand that. So it's a kind of a different market than a lot of places. Maybe around the New York City or around Dallas or Houston. Before school starts is the big time. And what's the school district like? Well, we have schools of choice. We don't have to worry about a school district.
Good. Well, that's good to know. So it sounds like, though, there are some opportunities for smaller investors to come in if there was awareness.
Right, as long as they know they have to invest with their money. And a lot of investors don't want to use their money. I mean, that's the nature of the game. That's true. But this is probably not the place for it.
Gotcha. All right, so that's a good time to talk about the short-term rental market in general. We've talked about an increase, do you think this trend? How do you think it's affecting like the traditional housing market? And do you feel like there's a glut? I mean, obviously there is a certain glut of long-term rentals in Galveston, but do you see that sustaining? Do you think those houses will sell off? What do you think?
Well, yeah,
looking 5 or 10 years down the road, what do you think the market?
Well, down the road, I think it's going to straighten out, and I also think, David, that people made mistakes, but you're allowed to make mistakes. It's called investing. It's called strategies. I wish that all the stock I bought, I made money. I wish every job I got, I liked. But all of a sudden, there's this expectation, and everyone. I mean, from Costco, Walmart to Neiman Marcus sells a brand. You go into Walmart, you're going to get the best prices. You might not get the best service, but you're getting the best prices. And you're going to probably find anything you need. And Costco, pretty much the same way. And in fact, Costco, you pay to be able to go in the store. So you kind of have an expectation. Neiman Marcus, on the other hand, I go in there and I want the best service in the world because I'm paying a lot more. And as long as people have those, if you know your objectives, it's the same thing in real estate. What do you want? But you can't put lipstick on a pig and expect to get top dollar. And that's what people are doing. And unfortunately, and you can see some renovations, and we had some beautiful cottages and bungalows, and why you take wood floors out to put in gray. And I'm sorry, and if people take offense at this, there's no such thing as luxury vinyl.
I agree. I agree.
You got to look at what are the finishes in a house. Why is it important to stage? But it's important to stage with a staging professional. And just because you put a couple of seashells in a sign that says "to the beach" doesn't make it a beach rental. So unfortunately, I mean, there's a glut of them, but the good ones are great. The people who do them the right way are fine. But there's another issue with short-term rentals that people didn't realize. The investors in Airbnb and all of those short-term rental companies, they pulled out and said you have to become profitable, and their fees went up. So as soon as the economy started to tank and people weren't spending as much money, their fees went up. So as another reason why people don't go to them all the time. So, gotcha. I mean...
Oh, that's good information. All right. You want to talk about the flood mitigation next?
Well, yeah, floods, it's very interesting. We get a lot of our clientele come from the Houston area, which is great. I always say that Galveston's the front yard of Houston. They like to think of it as the backyard because they have so much fun there. So, but I can't help but think, there's always silver linings. The 1900 storm was ridiculous for poor Galveston, the Galvestonians. People that are born on the island proudly exhibit their BOI because their family stayed. That's what it meant. It meant they didn't leave. So when they raised the island 17 feet, they also started to put in strong building codes.
Right.
And flood mitigation is one of them. You know, when you're down on the Strand and you complain about, well, unfortunately, when they did all that, no one was in a wheelchair or in crutches or had any kind of disability.
Right.
To get up some of those curbs was ridiculous. Now, of course, with ADA, thankfully, there's ramps. But that was so that they would be spillways for all the water.
Right.
So the Strand area and Post Office, Market, Mechanic, they're supposed to flood. That's what those streets were set up for.
Right.
So people come down, they don't really know it, but it does really lower the risk everywhere else. We've also had really good city council members through the years. One that comes to mind is a council person, Carolyn Tarleton, who's an insurance executive. And after Ike, she found out that Galveston was like rated a 5, but if we were a 13, our flood insurance would go down for everyone. And they worked on doing that. And so now our flood mitigation is great. After Ike, you know, we got money, thankfully, and they're doing street by street. They lowered Broadway. I don't understand how this works. They lowered the streets, and now it doesn't flood. But it doesn't.
Right.
So, which, you know, we just had a big...
We'll let the engineers figure that one
right,
out.
thank you. We had a big blow today, and it was fine.
Right.
Sure, the streets would still flood because we back up, because we're a gravity kind of system.
Yep.
Yes, but the city has been very good, and we have stronger building codes than a lot of places. And so as a result, yes, are hurricanes a pain in the neck? They are a pain in the neck. But thankfully, we very rarely lose a life, and everyone doesn't get devastated. We're able to be back.
Yeah.
So
Great.
That's one of the nice things. And, you know, when they raise an island 17 feet, most of the houses are now well above base flood elevation.
Right.
So your flood insurance is a lot more reasonable. I'm always amazed with people in Houston when they look at it and go, wow, that's all it is. So
That's great. All right. Let's see. Did you want to talk about luxury developments?
Well, you know, what's nice about Galveston, I remember being after Ike, and everybody's like, what would you like the island to be? Because that was a really bad storm. And and people kept saying, well, look at Miami Beach and look at Honolulu. And I was like, yeah, look at them. I think they're lovely. Oh,
right.
Well, but, you know, we're not them. We're a smaller island with an infrastructure that isn't that supportive. But the fact that we, in 2005 and 6, we had Palisade Palms, the Emerald, and Diamond Beach, which are luxury condominiums.
Right.
They fit right into the landscape of the island. And now Tierra broke ground, which is the first one since. And I think there's enough people that are like, wow, this is a nice place to be. It's an easy place to be. There's nice, fun festivals. It's diverse. It's tolerant. So I think there's enough room for them. And I mean, I've always worried about gentrification and pushing everyone out.
Right.
And, you know, there's been a big push with Bill Galveston and Vision Galveston for workplace housing. And I think that's going to be accomplished. We have a few things they're moving with that way so that folks, because we have a lot of folks who work in the hospitality industry and in the healthcare industry, which most people think, oh, you're in healthcare, you're making a lot of money. There's a lot of jobs that don't pay a lot in healthcare.
That's true.
And it's just like there is in hospitality. And if we can find places for them, and we have this, you know, so there's enough for our second homeowners for these lovely places to coexist with nice, I don't know if you know, the last time you've been on Broadway, but the Oleander homes, that's it. Affordable housing, but it's also subsidized. At 30%, 50% of the people are subsidized.
Right.
They pay 30% of their income, but they're stylish, nice places to live.
Right.
So, I mean, I think that's, a community is only as good as how it treats its least fortunate. And I think Galveston does a very good job of that.
Right. Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up because workforce housing is a big issue, and we're actually hoping to talk to Vision Galveston, and we'd love to talk to like Betty Massey about that. It's a huge issue. You know, it's almost become a third rail because everybody wants it, but no one knows where to put it. Well, but there are some successful projects that have been.
Well, you know, there's always a NIMBY, you know, not in my backyard, but I love the fact that now they're calling it workplace housing instead of affordable housing, because what's affordable?
Right.
You know, no one could ever put a number
down it.
You know, and I also think that it's great in the last 10 years, maybe 8 years. They got a community pool, and all the second graders get a week of lessons, or they used to. They get free swim lessons, because I think it's appalling that any child that grows up on an island and doesn't know how to swim is not right.
Yeah, that is true. All right, Tom, let's talk a little bit about investment hotspots, because if anybody would know, it's you. What neighborhoods do you think are attracting the most investment? What factors make them appealing to investors? Are there any places that aren't getting attention that should be, or maybe you want to keep those a secret? I don't know.
Well, here's the deal. When you're talking about investment hotspots, there's different ways. Do you want to invest in something and maybe just have it as a property that's going to appreciate in value and maybe make some money on it? Maybe like a short-term rental, maybe a beach house. The west end of Galveston is lovely. It's a great place you can go to. The houses are big enough. You can buy them. You can get 14 people for an Airbnb if you want. You can have family reunions. They're great for bridal parties, women's weekends, a lot of bachelor parties. I mean, there's a lot of fun stuff. And families, they're great grandchildren magnets. Until the kids get to junior high or middle school, up until then, mom and grandpa and pop or whatever, they're the greatest. And those are great. So those are lovely if that's what you want. Or do you want a family legacy? But you're all still working. And families today, they don't stay in the same neighborhoods typically where they were raised. So you might have siblings across the country. And isn't it fun to get together in a family place? So those are legacy, and that's that. Now, Galveston is also so fortunate to have one of the largest inventories of Victorian housing in the country. Even though there was a fire in 1887 that burned a lot of them, the 1900 storm, we still have so many lovely, wonderful historic homes that constantly are being, the ones that need a little love, they're finding it. There's a lot of people in this country and in this world that like to restore old homes. I look at the historic districts, it's like a visit to grandmother's house. You can go to a football game and you can watch the cheerleaders down cheering. They're young, they're fresh, they got their whole lives ahead of them. And that's new subdivisions. Galveston doesn't have many of those. But then after the game, you go back to grandma's for hot cocoa and popcorn. And you see the wrinkles on their face, and you see they've lived. What can they tell you? What can they experience? And how can that help you? That's what there was a show on years ago called If These Walls Could Talk. Galveston would be shouting. So as you see, so historic homes are an investment, even if you're going to live in it with your children, because what you're doing is you're a caretaker. And as a good friend once said, you got to live on the West End though, or near West End in town, because those houses have closets, and we have kids, and we have bikes, and they need garages. But when you get a little older and your kids are in college or they've moved away, those historic homes are lovely because you don't have as much stuff. And so but what you do have is it's a legacy, and that's so it's investing in it. And then of course, when the historic homes tour comes, which is the largest one in the country, people start to think of them, and it's like, I could invest in one of those, and you're investing in it maybe. There's some monetary value because I own one. I've owned it for 40 years, and it's turning into a great investment. But you know what? It's also a family. I've already passed it down to the next generation. So there's other kinds of investments in what we're doing, and I think that's and we have 5 historic districts. So
that's a good point. There, housing it connects to family. It's not all about money. It's not all about trying to buy the perfect property at the perfect time. It's about that experience that you get from it, I feel like.
They call it generational wealth. And first-time home buyers in a family, not just the first time they're buying a house, but it's like with education, the first child in the generation to go to college, the generations after them, it's amazing how many of them, if they want, now they see that they can do it. Not necessarily college isn't for everyone, but they can. It's the same thing with buying a house. If you're the first person to buy a home in your family, other members, your siblings, cousins, nephews, nieces say, hey, if he or she can do it, I can do it. And that's a different kind of investment. I don't know if everyone looks at it that way. And we certainly have plenty of those. And I guess the last place I talk about for hotspots, we're getting a lot more young folk. And I'm pretty happy with that. When I moved to Galveston when I was 28, there weren't that many. And now, and there's a whole little, I call it a beach community, between the seawall and maybe Avenue S. Maybe Avenue R. I'll go down
Okay.
to. And there's all these great little bungalows, 2 and 3 bedrooms, 1 and 2 baths. And I mean, I never call anything a starter home, but it's a great starting place.
Right.
And, you know, it works. And you're close and convenient to the beach and downtown.
Right.
So.
Yeah. All right, Tom, I appreciate everything that you've talked about today so far. There's got a couple other things to cover if you got time. I was thinking, what are we looking at long-term outlook as far as the market fluctuations? We talked about it a little bit, and also market saturation. How do you feel like those will change over time? Do you think they'll change?
Sure. You know, one of the positives, one of the few positives of getting older is you've been there and you've done that. And I have certainly been there and done that. You know, thankfully we had Hurricane Ike, so we missed the whole recession that came right after it. So we didn't have to know the market was bad. We didn't have a market.
Right.
So of course, are things going to straighten out? Absolutely. They will eventually. You know, the millennial generation is larger than the boomer generation. Sure, they're having a hard time now buying a home, but that's going to change because every year they're making more money.
Right.
So things will straighten out. It's tough right now. And there's a lot of real estate agents that probably shouldn't have been real estate agents. So like everything else, the market is oversaturated.
Right.
So, you know, the stronger will survive, things will get better, and we'll be happy. And I think, you know, that's a big thing. And one of the nice things about living in a place like Galveston is the community involvement. We're already talking about things like workforce housing. We're talking about, okay, you just built another new hospital. What are we going to do? We have all these people coming in. Where are they going to live? How are they going to live? Right. You know, not everything has to be a single family home now. You know, there's all kinds of, there's probably, you know, I'm surprised we haven't even had a shared housing yet, like they are in some of the big cities. And I think that young folks, maybe they're residents at UTMB, or maybe they're adjunct professors at Galveston College, and they live together that way, starting out their adventure.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's a lot. And the one nice thing about Galveston is while they might not be very conducive to change yet, they eventually do, but they also welcome many different ideas. So I think we're uniquely situated for that. And we're also an island. So you don't got a lot of extra room. You know, it's not like when I moved to Houston in 1984, there was a distinct break between Houston and Katy. Then it was prairies, and then it was San Antonio. Now it's San Antonio, Sealy, Houston. There's, you know, 2 miles of nothing, and that's it.
Yeah, this whole area is almost one big city, you know.
And so as a result, you know, we're a little unique that way. And being on an island, you know, everyone is valuable. You can't afford not to utilize everyone in every market. So I think those are, you know, things that make me want to get up every day and know that the future is going to be brighter and brighter. Now, as far as the policies we're seeing coming from the government, well, they're just, as you know, there's that big tax bill right now that, as some people are saying, it's going to help the wealthy, and like Medicare may be cut. But the one interesting thing about it is the 5 priorities that the National Association of Realtors have all been passed, and they're all to protect homeowners and their taxes and everything else. So, on that sense, real estate's looking really good. And I'm, you know, I'm proud to say that I'm the past chair of the Texas Political Involvement Committee, and I'm going to Washington this week for Hill visits and legislative meetings, because I got to know everything. So when I advise someone, you know, I have great nieces that are getting old enough to buy a house, and you know, some of my clients are 25 and 30. I want to make sure that I have everything that I can tell them what these tax incentives are and what being a homeowner is and how it is, and I want to make sure I have like Randy Weber's ear and Mays Middleton's ear and Terry Leo Wilson's ear. So to say, hey, this is what folks need. You know, if you can aspire to a home and have one, let's see how we can keep it. So there are policies in place, and I know in other parts of the country where they build new houses, and they have to have new houses because, you know, the suburbs of Houston and Dallas, and say they're growing and growing and growing. And there's already a 4.65 million house unit shortage. Wow. If they build. So it's incredible. So, and as I said there, and the millennials are big, Then the next one, the alpha generation, is smaller. Even though the millennials were so big, unlike the boomers to the millennials, that's obviously why it was so much. So
Right.
we'll have to see, but you're talking. It's going to happen. So, I mean, am I optimistic? Yeah, of course. I mean, you get two ways to look at things.
Right.
And then the other way is like, yeah, you got to worry about, they're taxing more on investment properties. You have an additional $250 stipend on your flood insurance if it's a second home. So that also curtails things when our taxes have gone up so much because we're a state without a sales tax.
Right.
So where are we getting our money? So,
Yep.
but my last piece of advice, I know I've spoken a lot, is each and every homeowner that listens to this, please fight your taxes every year. They expect you to.
Right.
And if you don't, they're just going to keep going up.
Right.
And usually you can justify why your taxes are high. But then when you turn around to sell it, you can't complain about that and say you want this much.
Right.
Just saying.
Right. Double-edged sword there. Well, one thing I'll say about Galveston is, the beach isn't going anywhere. It's going to be beautiful. We're going to have all these beautiful historic properties. It's an amazing community. I don't see that changing. So, I feel very optimistic about the future of Galveston. Everyone I'm talking to does. I feel like even though there's these challenges that sometimes get overblown, I mean, flooding is a challenge. The housing market's a challenge. There's a lot of things we got to look at, but I think we probably both agree that Galveston is an amazing place to live and buy property and work and go to school there, and that's not going to change.
No, it's not. And I can also put in that I'm neglecting is look at our cruise business.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing about it, people go on a cruise down there and they get on and they get off. But it's amazing how many with the hotels, God bless them. Hey, you come down here, you stay tonight, and you stay the night after you go off the cruise. We give you free parking and shuttle you down there.
Right.
They get 2 more days to see it. When you're on vacation, you're looking at. And I've sold 3 houses from cruise folk.
That's great.
So,
That is good.
it's another thing.
Right.
Most beach communities have a beach. We have a beach. We have a great medical center.
Right.
We have the cruises. We have a lot of good stuff.
Yeah, it is. It's a very unique city. There's New Orleans. New Orleans is incredibly unique, obviously, but Galveston is small. It's completely different. I feel like it has a lot of the things that New Orleans has. Plus,
Yeah, I agree with you. And I mean, here's one of mine when, I invite family from the Northeast down for Mardi Gras. And they ask me the difference between New Orleans Mardi Gras and Galveston Mardi Gras. And I love the Galveston Mardi Gras. Here's the deal. In my opinion, this is just my opinion, and I'm from the Northeast, so don't take offense. New Orleans is the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
Galveston's is the wild card playoff. It's still great, and actually I kind of like it better because I could never afford to go to a Super Bowl game, but I could always afford to go to a wild card playoff.
Right.
So there you have it. And
All
I'm pretty happy that we got that.
I like that. All right. Well, I really appreciate you taking all this time to talk to us. Maybe you can come back sometime soon. We want to keep you involved, and if we have any questions about real estate, I know you're the guy to go to. And if anybody who's watching has questions about real estate or has a property to sell, Tom's the guy to talk to.
Yeah, talk to Tom, please.
Talk to Tom. That's the slogan. So, all right. Well, I appreciate you coming, man.
Thanks, David.
All right.
It was
Let's talk
great.
again soon.
Good to see you.